What are the two biggest assets in our community? When asked, many people say our lakes and the pool. In addition, our individual homes and their values. Hi, I'm Bill Krokos. I'm currently the Vice President of the Lake Camelot RTA Board and the Ad Hoc Dredge Committee Chairman. I've been a resident in Lake Camelot for about 12 years, and I've enjoyed the benefits of being in the lake community. The friendships, activities, lakes, pool, play areas, tennis courts, the clubhouse, the nearby schools, and of course the gorgeous views are what make our community a great place to live. I care about where I live and the community in which I live in. At the recently held board meeting on September 21st, I presented to the board the preliminary budget numbers for the dredging project and ravine repairs. Based on the information provided over the last year and a half, along with the preliminary numbers, the board voted unanimously to put the vote out to the community. In this presentation, I will do my best to explain the history of the last year and a half, what we have done by the committee to get us to where we are today. Then I'll have a question and answer session to answer some of the many questions we received and ones currently asked. I know there may be more as time goes on. If you have another, please feel free to funnel them to either to the board, come to a meeting, or the Camelot RTA page. And there's a dredging section where you can go ahead and put that at. We will continue to share all the information to the public as much as possible. This is not the work of just a few people. The Dredge Committee has 13 members, and many have been very active. Some of them even joined the board and taken leadership roles in other committees. Land and Lakes have been involved since its inception. I can honestly tell you that well over 1,000+ hours have been volunteered in the last year and a half. I have found out even previous boards and committees have been discussing this project and the magnitude it would take to complete. We thank them for their previous contributions. So let's begin. Let's go over the history. The Ad Hoc Dredge Committee was formed by the board in July of 2015. Our goal is to research the dredging and erosion control for our two lakes while discussing the findings to the community and the board. Then determine the best way to handle this and present it to the board with preliminary numbers of the project. Finally, present this to the community to vote. These are the items performed that got us where we are today. First, we formed a committee with volunteers. We have 13 members currently. We met with Land and Lakes Committee to discuss the goals for the dredging. Reviewed the last dredging project steps from 24 years ago. Back then, they rented and leased property from surrounding farming neighbors. Due to the lack of their not having all the proper training needed to perform the task, we had debris along with bean silt deposited on these farmers' properties. The farmers have told us that they recently just got the property back to farming shape and would not be interested in us leasing it from them in the future. However, current methods utilized would alleviate with that from happening in the future. Also back then, we purchased a dredge machine, which we sold later. The dredge was manned by folks that just got some simple training, and they were paid community people. Some were first-timers, and yes, some mistakes were made on depth, etc. They did not establish erosion control methods. Because of this, we need to dredge certain targeted areas. It is decided that we need to develop an erosion control plan as part of the dredging process. Listening to the elder members of the community at meetings has some debates with regrets to an increase in dues or a special assessment that believe were never clarified. We found out that the board, after the dredging 24 years ago, decided to maintain the increase in dues. I wasn't around then, but the board will be as upfront with you as possible throughout this entire process. We met with a local company who did the dredging on the river, PA Atherton, and they shared some of the highlights of what they were doing. We reviewed an August 2014 hydrographic and sediment survey that was performed by a board before us. You can see that past boards and committees have been looking at this issue. The survey showed certain target areas to concentrate on to remove silt. These are the target areas. A committee met with the Peoria Soil and Water. We found out that our biggest problem is our ravines. That most of the sediment is likely coming off of the RTA common lands that are heavily forested ravines. The committee met with The committee met with the community and also gathered questions. We had some fact-finding discussions with 4 other lake communities. We talked to Lake Wildwood, Wonder Lake, Oak Run, and Woodhaven. We talked to them because they were either dredging or dredged, and we tried to gather their best practices. Based on these discussions, we learned that we need to meet with 3 consultants who were recommended for their expertise. The first one is Joe Rush from Jadico. He's known for his water quality testing, best weed treatment practices, and also does a lot with the 319 grant. So we looked at him for about a feasibility of a 319 grant. And I'll talk more about that through the presentation. Bill Schaefer from Illinois Valley Surveying and Consulting for his review of our ravines and sediment reduction survey. This study needed to be done by an engineer, which Bill is, for the purpose of applying for the 319 grant and for our community to follow as we plan to repair the ravines. The 319 grant will allow us funds, if approved, to reduce the cost of our ravine repairs. We need to have a ravine study that shows loading of dirt, silt, phosphorus, and nitrogen to be put together with the 319 grant, so that's why we also had to have that study done. Finally, Peter Barini from Barini & Associates for his dredging and waterway consulting. They will help us determine preliminary numbers once we determine a dewater site and write a specification for the dredging project and assist us in the permitting process. Then we visited 3 out of the 4 lake communities. I personally went to Lake Wildwood, Kathy Mulchin went to Wonder Lake, Steve Herrenberg went to Oak Run for their best practices. We took some pictures, and we all came back and shared this information, and we confirmed that we're moving in the right direction. We met with community to update and to respond to the questions that were asked at the previous meeting. We started a dredge page on the RTA Camelot website, which is still active today. We continue to communicate through the newspaper and the RTA webpage, and also at board meetings. All this information that we've gathered has been communicated to the board. We sent out in 2015 a lake management survey. We met with Land and Lakes to discuss the 2010 survey and a 2015 survey, findings and work on an action plan. Note, some of the items we learned in the 2015 from the community survey, which we received 101 of. The respondents rated activities. They said 72% were fishing, 51% were swimming, 20% were canoeing and kayaking, 8% was jet skiing, 21% ice fishing, 43% was pleasure boating, and 9% was water skiing. 75% of the respondents rated the lakes, 55% rated them fair, and 20% rated them poor. 76% agreed that the silt buildup in the coves and the main water inlets. 78% of the respondents agreed we should dredge, implement erosion control, build a lake management plan to increase the water quality and control silt infiltration. 75% of respondents indicated that they would pay additional fees annually implementing dredge operations and erosion control efforts. The dollar amounts are low, but 25% said $50, 27% said $100, and 23% said over $100. Research property possibilities for dewatering sites with Peter Barini. Peter and I tromped through a lot of different properties. Basically, it cost the community $20 for him and I to spend close to 4 to 5 hours walking through properties. We tracked through many wooded areas around Lake Camelot. The goal was to find a flat piece of land very close to Lake Camelot, either on the upper lake or the lower lake. This visit was unsuccessful. As explained earlier in last dredging project, these areas that we used last time were unavailable this time. So therefore, we had to continue to figure something out. After much review, we presented the board some requests and received approval to form a 319 grant feasibility study, a water testing and aquatic training, and a professional survey and study of ravines. These were the things that we needed to get started. Bill Schaefer, the gentleman that will help us with the sediment survey to get us the information that we need for the ravines and also for the 319 grant, we paid him a study. It cost us about $6,000. Joe Rush from Jadaco for doing water quality testing. It's kind of like a blood test. You got to know where we are and where we're going to, and also teach us some best weed treatment practices. In addition, he's the one that did a feasibility analysis on a 319 grant. That cost us $12,700. We also located a potential dewatering site during this time and presented it to the board. However, this fell through, but challenged us to continue to look elsewhere. During that time, we received the ravine study and had a combined meeting with Bill Shaver, the board, and the Dredge Committee, and Land and Lakes to discuss its content and plan. It was decided that the Land and Lakes will begin with the ravines and one of the 3 highest that were targeted out of the 27. Here's some pics of what the ravine looked like from start to finish. This is a pic of number 9, one of the areas. Here's another pic of us doing some prep work. Here's another picture of a check dam being put in. And then here's another picture of another check dam. We're still working on this ravine. We had some challenges when we had all the water during the first time we put it in, so Land and Lakes group has come up and had our construction company come out back, look at it, and give us a bid on fixing what was damaged and keeping it so it doesn't happen in the future. Then we continued the search for dewatering sites with Peter Barini. This time, we asked that we give him something for his time, more than just taking him out to lunch. And Peter said, yes, I will gladly accept something. So Peter agreed to $300. We looked at even more areas. We found a close neighbor was interested in selling their property. It was 17 acres with a home. It was estimated over $325,000 plus $100,000 to $150,000 to prepare it for use. So that's quite expensive. There was a piece of property listed 5 miles away. That was about $220,000. It was flat, but we would have to truck the silt from one location, which is Lake Camelot, all the way over to that piece of property. That would be the most expensive method. And that would be like our last resort if we couldn't find something locally. Both of these were decided against. There were discussions about using smaller areas with a method called geotextile tubes, also known as geotubes. The tubes can be filled with silt and water stacked in a pyramid style, usually 2 to 3 high, and can also come in different sizes. The area where they lay must be flat. These tubes would decant the water and be able to be broken open to have silt moved or hauled away to a designated area. In our talks with our neighbors, some are interested in hauling off some of this when it's dry. It's a bonus, as we would have less to deal with when we have to spread it out when it's completed and dry. The tube debris will then be sent to a landfill. So we asked Peter, not the first time, about building a structure back in the ravines to which the silt was generated. He responded unfavorably. His words were, "Not very easy, Bill. Ravines are typically sloping and geotubes need flatter ground. Also, clearing, disturbing, and placing soft sediment in ravines is always risky because of the potential for storm runoff and remobilization sediment before it's stabilized. And ravines may potentially contain wetlands at lower areas. Existing ravines would be better to trap future runoff with slotted risers, dry dams, and check dams, which is part of what we did with our ravine study. Individual locations can be easily elevated to see if some potential exists for storing in small amounts of sediment, but he's not overly optimistic. Therefore, it was realized every ravine area would cost more to utilize versus the cost to protect. So we said, we're just going to work on protecting the ravines. And that's what Land and Lakes is working on from the ravine study today. Finally, we looked at utilizing small areas around Lake Camelot. The baseball fields just below the dam. If you look at the 2 ball dime areas, also Harker's Corner entrance we currently own 6 acres. And then in front of the clubhouse, where that path goes up. These areas can be utilized and can hold up to 40,000 cubic yards of silt. That is quite a chunk of silt. And basically, if we looked at one of the ball diamonds, this is an example of how it would lay. So therefore, these are our target areas. We don't have to buy any property. All we have to do is utilize our current property in a smart manner to be successful. These areas can be used using the geotubes and cleaned back up once the silt dries in a year or so. Lake Camelot and baseball can be coordinated with the use of Hollis Park, and the fireworks launching would have to be in a different launch site, undetermined as of yet. The preliminary numbers were developed with the help of Peter's expertise. The board received a preliminary budget analysis on September 2016 board meeting supplied by a leader in the dredging field. I shared all those findings with the board. The summary of this analysis is listed below. Preliminary cost of this project is expected at $1.221 million, and the cost of the ravine repairs are $250,000, which was estimated and added for the total cost of the project. Utilizing our current properties, we will save the community lots of money, and these properties will be brought back to their close original form. This work is included in the cost. Basically, we'll have regulatory permitting, we'll have dredge and pipeline mobilization, we'll have dredging and dewatering of the geotextile tubes, design, bidding, construction oversight, site preparation, temporary erosion control by contractor, pumping lake makeup water as needed. And people say, what is that? Basically, if we're grabbing water from one side and filling up the tubes, we may lose water off the site, so we'll have to share the water from both lakes in the process. Also, there'll be some site grading and restoration. That came out to about $1,110,000. Peter suggested we put a 10% contingency on those numbers, so we did. Also, the estimated ravine repairs is estimated at $250,000. Note that if we get the 319 grant, we will have some funding to put against that, and it'll make those costs less. But there's only about a 23% chance for us in that process. And the reason is, on the 319 grant, there is close to $13 to $14 million of people asking for money. They only give out 3.5 to 4 million. We have a 23% chance, but next year when we apply, we're in an area that is looked at taking priority, so we may have more than a 23% chance. Therefore, the cost estimate of the total project is $1,471,000. Basically, it's $1,221,000 for the dredging plus $250,000 for the ravine repairs. What does this mean for each owner of a lot? Well, we have 698 lots. The board decided on 2 options. Someone can make a full upfront payment, or we can make it easy and split it over 5 years. This will be an addition amount due to our dues that are currently paid. So basically, if we did it at one payment, it's $2,107.45. If we split it over 5 years, it's basically $421.49 per each lot owner, or basically $35.12 per month. It's a chunk of change, either way you look at it. Try to put it in perspective and say we estimated the value of each lot homeowner at $200,000. Some people say, no, the mean average is $160,000. Some say, no, it's $250,000. I'm just going to use $200,000 for this estimate. And we understand we have 698 homes. Lake Camelot's properties say it's worth $10 million with the lakes and everything we have around. So if we look at it, the total cost of the project is a low percentage of the total property value as a whole. What do I mean by that? If I took the $200,000 times 698, I come up with $139,600,000 of combined home owner property values. You add the $10 million of Lake Camelot estimate, there's about $150 million, $149,600,000. If we divided that by a preliminary cost of the project, it's basically only 1% of the total property value. So if you had to replace a hot water heater in your home, it would feel a lot like that. But for that as a whole with our properties and Lake Camelot's properties. Then finally, we had, with the help of Land and Lakes Committee, the board will develop a comprehensive lake management plan for all future boards and management to follow. This will give us a baseline of all this information we've gained over the year and a half, 2 years, or if we do the dredging project, another 5 years, put all that together in a book so we don't have to do all the homework that our committee has done over the last year and a half. It'll all be there for them. Then the committee and the board sent out a flyer and did an insert in the paper. They were there to educate the community. The board will be inserting a voting ballot in the up-and-coming board members' election ballots. And then now this presentation is developed to help educate the community of the history of what we've done. After going through the history, here I'm going to talk about some questions that have come out over the last year and a half and some that have come out recently. People asked, when's the last time we dredged? Well, we had dredged approximately 24 years ago. And at that time, we did not plan for ravine erosion control. Why should we dredge? Well, the Illinois EPA has tons of lists, and these are why other lake communities have did it. Improved navigation, the water depth and ease of your boating in the coves. Improved fishing and fish habitat. Reduced weeds. Improved navigation. Restore recreational access for leisure boating, swimming, and fishing. Restore lost storage capacity of lakes. Remove nutrient-rich sediments, excessive phosphorus, reducing nuisance algae blooms. This occurs through direct removal of nutrient-rich sediments, the silt, or deepening the lake to stop sun from reaching these areas for rooted growth. Remove toxic ground contamination, reduce aquatic plant growth, reduce sediment suspension by winds and waves, improves water quality, and limits future regrowth of aquatic plants. Also, it'll increase the fish survivability by removing aquatic plants that steal oxygen from fish. Why are we working on the ravines? Well, per our research and report from one of our experts, the ravines have allowed debris and silt build up in the lakes, and it's the #1 reason for us having to redredge. How long will it take to dredge? As we understand it, the actual dredging will only last 2 to 3 months with good weather. It's all the other planning, engineering, permits, setup, and final cleanup will make the process last 3 to 5 years. And so how long will the ravine repairs take? The same thing, between 3 and 5 years. They'll be done simultaneously. Depending on the rain and working availability and good weather, both dredging and ravine repair will happen at the same time. Why are we doing this now? Well, in 2014 we did a hydrographic sediment survey which highlighted the trouble areas, and I showed you those trouble areas. Here they are again. These are the trouble areas that we found. We witnessed, and other lake communities have done this too. If left alone, the silt and debris will continue to fill the lakes in the troubled areas and our lake access. Consequently, property values may become stagnant and go backwards. And that's a strong statement, and I'll talk more about that in the future. Where are we putting it? After researching different areas, it appears we have to utilize Lake Camelot property, and we'll utilize the method called the geotubes. They will hold water and silt, and then the soil can be dealt with. So here's a big question you've heard multiple times. Will it smell? Well, if you ever stuck your hand at the bottom of the lake and brought it up and smelled it, which I did, and I've done it for my kids as a joke, it smells fishy. You can smell the gas, the methane gas. It's really not that appealing. But after a bit, the smell dissipates and goes away. Our dredge expert says it only lasts for a short time, then goes away. Why did we decide on the method you're talking about? Well, it's the least cost method for our lake availability and process. And it's really the only properties we have. It actually works pretty good together. And then we relied on our experts' advice for their guidance through this process. Why don't we have money for this? Good question. The reality is that previous boards did some saving, but did not understand how much this is going to cost. And we really didn't start doing any extreme long-range planning and saving until just about 3 or 4 years ago, when we were looking at this and saying, hey, this needs to be done. When they did the hydrographic survey, it kind of put the light on things. When I got on the board just about 1.5 years ago and got involved with anything, the light went on for me too and said, oh, we really have a problem. And everybody says, yes, we do, but there's a lot of work that needs to be done. And I would say there is. Will we ever need a dredge again? Yeah, we will. There'll be some smaller areas that we'll have to dredge again, but we believe that with proper planning and doing in our lake management plan, we'll be able to budget for them in the future. What are we going to do with all we learned? When completed, the goal is to develop a comprehensive lake management plan for the future boards to follow. What does this all cost? Well, we went over it. It's going to be $1,471,000 divided by 698. That's $2,107.45 per each lot owner. Or if you paid over 5 years, $421.49, or basically monthly, it's $35.12. What does this mean for people with multiple lot ownerships? Well, for every lot owner, there's the same cost of $2,107.45 or in 45 cents. $2,107.45. If somebody owns more than one, they will have to multiply that number. So if they own 4 lots or 3 lots or 2, it's that number times that. For every lot you have, that's how it would be split. What happens if I'm selling my house? Who pays what is still owed on my assessment? Unpaid dues and assessments will have to be addressed at the time of closing. Shouldn't people who live on the lake pay more? We have 698 lot owners. Dues and assessments are spread evenly over the 698. Will the dredge operations dredge all the sediment from both lakes? No. Following the 2014 Hydrographic and Sediment Survey done a few years back, it highlighted the trouble areas, and these are the areas of concern. Again, those are the target areas. Can we still use the lakes during the dredging operations? Certain areas can be used as long as it doesn't interfere with the dredge. Limiting traffic in the dredging areas will allow the dredge company to be swift, thorough, and safe through the process. Why don't we just buy a dredge and have volunteers do the work? Well, we talked about that a little bit in history, what we did 24 years ago. Currently, the methods and expertise used by the dredging companies today offer swift, thorough, and safe through the entire process. They do this for a living. We don't. When you ask about ravine repairs, what is it specifically we are going to do to stop the erosion and sediment from coming in the lakes? Land and Lakes Committee started ravine repairs in number 9 from the ravine study. They are following the suggestions given to us by the ravine study and learning to improve our own specifications for the future ravines. There is a total of 27 of them. We're working on 1 of the 27. So that means we got 26 left. So if you divide that by 5 years, that's basically 5 to 6 a year. Why can't we just dump the dredge material in the ravines? I also talked about this earlier. As stated in the history discussion, ravines are typically sloping and geotubes need flatter ground. Also, clearing, disturbing, and placing soft sediment in ravines is always risky because of the potential for a storm runoff and remobilization sediment before it is stabilized. And ravines may potentially contain wetlands at lower ends. Existing ravines will be better to trap future runoff with slotted risers, dry dams, and check dams. And that's what our Land and Lakes group is doing with the ravine study, following that. Will the association develop drawings and specifications and bid the project out to contractors? Well, yeah, this is the plan if approved. We would hire Peter Barini and Barini & Associates for dredging and dewatering consulting. They will help us write a specification for the dredging project, assist us in the permitting process, and process to finish. These items will then go out for bid. Will the ravine repairs be done before the dredging process, and how long will it take? The ravines will be done alongside the dredging project. It'll probably take 3 to 5 years to finish up all the ravines. Then, as part of the lake management plan, they will need to be inspected and maintained. What happens if during the 5-year assessment payback period, we have a significant capital improvement is needed for a pool or the clubhouse or dam repair? Honestly, the board will have to deal with that as well. If the community votes no for this project, and does not want the board, does the board have a backup plan? It's the community's decision to vote. A yes would start the project within 3 to 5 year timeline. A no would stall it until the dues are high enough to cover the cost. The board is giving the community the decision. With the information shared, the board believes we should move forward, and this is why it is out for a vote. Who counts the votes? The ballots are going out with the ballot elections for board member term changes in November. A voting committee is set up to handle this task as in years past. Will dredging improve property values? Listed on the webpage, there are 2 studies from other lake communities that show that dredging would improve community property values. You can go to there and read them in detail. They're very long. The summaries basically talk about improved economic values. What would be the flow of this dredging and ravine process if approved? Have a bid specification written for the dredging process, apply for necessary permits, start with 5 to 6 ravines for the next 5 years, bid the project and accept the best bids, initiate the engineering and dredging process, weather permitting, close up dredging process and let the geotubes decant, schedule silt removed by approved companies, clean up sites used. Then we're going to finish up with the lake management plan. I want to conclude with, we discussed the history of what has been done by the Dredge Committee and shared many of the highlights of all the research performed. If there's any questions, feel free to ask me or any of the board members. We then offered a question and answer segment as well. We tried to cover as many questions as possible. If we didn't, please funnel your questions in. Now, it is up to the community to decide if we should move forward. If you have future questions, please forward them to our general manager, any member of the board, or go to the Lake Camelot RTA page. Thank you for allowing me to give this presentation, and I appreciate the opportunity to be on the board and do this for our community. Thank you.